Yud Gimel Cheshvan Shir Kali Parshas Vayeira.
Shishlo. What on earth are you up to now? I want you guys in here. I don't want you to sit down. Come on, it doesn't need to take hours. Come on. Get moving. What would you do? All right, so we're turning in this week's parsha to chapter 22, pasuk Aleph. This is the passage in the Torah which deals with the famous trial that was given to Avraham Avinu, which we call the Nisoyin Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak and the offering of Yitzchak as a oilah by his father Aaron taking his one and only son. Well, it wasn't his one and only son, but his only son that was to be considered his real descendant, and offer him up as a korban to the Eibishter. And it begins with the chapter 22, begins with the first pasuk. But prior to that, we're told of a surprising meeting that Avraham Avinu had with Avimelech when he was the king of the Philistines. Avraham Avinu had a whole long discussion with him in which he made a covenant with Avimelech that he would protect and not ever harm his generations for future to come. And it was a covenant that he made with Avimelech. And he offered him 7 sheep out of his flock as a sign of the covenant, with a whole long story that the Torah tells us how he made this bris with Avimelech. And then we're told that even though in the pasuk before our pasuk, Vayoga Avraham, the Eretz Plishtim Yovim Rabim, that Avraham Avinu lived in the land of Plishtim. Yomim Rabim, he lived many days in that land. But in the pasuk before that, we're told that Avraham Avinu had himself a Beit Chabad, that is called an Eishel Beber Shova. He had a big base Chabad, because Rashi says that it was, according to one opinion, it was, well, according to both opinions, he used this tent that he had to be open for all the public who could come in, and they could have a meal there with all sorts of good food and fruits. But when they finished, they had to bench the Eibishter, and they had to learn about the Eibishter, etc., etc., and that was in Be'er Sheva. So how does that fit with the fact that he was living in Eretz Plishtim? Well, Be'er Sheva, if we look carefully on the map, then Be'er Sheva is not in Eretz Plishtim. It's slightly out of the border of Eretz Plishtim, even though it's interesting that the Torah calls that whole area Eretz Plishtim, because it's really part of Eretz Yisrael. It was promised to Avraham Avinu and all the Yidden, and it belongs essentially to Yidden as part of Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Plishtim. And that's approximately nowadays where Ashdod and Ashkelon and some of those places are down the south, near the coast. that includes what was in those days Eretz Plishtim. So how, if Avraham Avinu was living in Eretz Plishtim, how come he had this, this is just a small point, that he had this center in Beersheba that he was using to spread the word of Hashem to all the people. So we could say that Avraham Avinu lived in Eretz Plishtim, but he kept a Beit Chabad in Beersheba. He used to pop over every day or every moment to see how his wondrous center for spreading the knowledge of Torah and of the Eibishter to everybody in those days. And like we brought down last week, the Rambam brings that Avraham Avinu managed, and he was matzliach, to speak to tens of thousands of people through his Beit Chabad. So I mean, that's absolutely amazing. In those days there was no emails and computer systems. There wasn't even any loudspeakers. And after Pekain, he managed to speak to tens of thousands of people, Kedivrei Rambam. So after all that, begins at chapter 22, and it says, Vayehi achar advorim ha'eleh. After these particular matters, V'Elokim niso es Avraham. At the Eibishter, he tried Avraham Avinu. Niso, he gave him a trial, or he literally demanded of him something unusual and contradictory. Niso es Avraham. Vayemer Elov, and he said to Avraham Avinu, Avraham, and he said to him, Vayemer Hineni, here I am. And Rashi says that's Lashon Hanova of his Rizos, that the great tzaddikim are always ready, and therefore he said, here I am, I'm ready for whatever you'll say. Vayemer kach no es bincho es yechidcho asher ahavto es yitcho. Please take your son, your one and only son, and the one that you have loved so much, and you must take him el eretz haMoriah, to the land of the Moriah, va'aleu sham li'elah, and you should offer him up there as a burnt offering. How do you call it? A oilah, a complete offering, as we know that an oilah is a complete offering on the fire. Al achad he'orim asher imaylech, on one of the mountains which I will show you. And so Rashi tells us Eretz HaMoriah means Yerushalayim. In other words, Eretz HaMoriah is a name for what we call nowadays Yerushalayim, and the Har, which he was later told by the Eibishter, that's the Har, the mountain on which the Beis HaMikdash is built. And this is it was there that the altar was uncovered by Avraham Avinu. There's an altar there already from the time of Noach, because we learned 2 weeks ago about the korban offered by Noach, and by Adam HaRishon, that Adam HaRishon also offered a korban on that same mountain. And so Avraham Avinu uncovered that Mizbeach, and he offered there his son Yitzchak as an offering on that Mizbeach. So we have to be misbehaving for a moment. What does this imply in the most simple terms? That he had got a man that he was already well over 100 years old, Avraham Avinu. He'd had a very tough life, as you might say, to put it mildly, a very demanding and tough life. What's his name over there? You have to move over to the center, because I don't teach a class where I can't see everybody. You can sit there, but sit between people. Sit between people. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, and in a indirect way, you're wasting my time. So here we have a man that he's already well over 100 years, and he has a son who was born to him miraculously. He would never have had a son had it not been a miracle what the Eibishter made for him that he had. because he and Sarah Imenu gave birth to Yitzchak when they were both elderly people. Well, in an age where it's not possible, according to Teva, to have children, and yet nonetheless they had Yitzchak. So we can imagine, and the Rabbeinu Bechaya, one of the really great early Rishonim, goes into detail how great Avraham Avinu's attachment to Yitzchak must have been. In other words, that he must have had an ahava to Yitzchak, not according to the usual type of ahava klal. Because first of all, it's well known that a son of the elderly age is always a very dear son to people. It's called a ben zikunim. We find later with Yaakov Avinu that he loved Yosef, because the term says why? Because he was a ben zikunim. He was born his latter age, in his latter year. And that's number one. Then number two, he was born miraculously. And number three, the Eibishter told him that everything that he had would go on to Yitzchak. All that he'd achieved in the world, all his heritage would be passed on and would be carried on in the world by Yitzchak. So we can imagine the tremendous love and what you might call anticipation that Avraham Avinu had for Yitzchak. I mean, it's hard to picture it in our mind. We take into account the unbelievable circumference of Avraham Avinu as a person in general. So how great must have been his emotions and his feelings. And here he is with his son, and he's already 37 years old. Rashi says that Yitzchak was 37 years old at the time of the occasion, which means he wasn't a little boy. He was a man who had reached his mature age in all ways that we could describe it, even in those days where people still used to live a bit older than what we do nowadays, but not incomparably. So therefore Yitzchak was a man which had reached his full maturity. And the love between them was unimaginable. Nonetheless, comes along the same Eibishter, what he gave him miraculously, the son, and made all the promises to him. I told him that this is going to be your seed, this is going to be your son, not Ishmael. Despite the fact that we're going to see in a minute Ishmael did tshuva. And nonetheless, the Eibishter says to him, your only heritage is going to be Yitzchak Avinu. All of a sudden, there comes along the same Eibishter, and he says to him, Hezekiah, Kach no es bincho, take him, and I know that you've loved him and he's everything to you, but nonetheless, offer him up as a korban on this and this mountain, which turns out later to be the mountain of Har HaBayis, the Beis Hamikdash. Take him and offer him up as a korban. So we can imagine what should have been going on in Avraham Avinu's feelings and in his mind when he hears this from the Eibishter. And at Kedei Kach, the Eibishter says to him, Kach no, please do it. In other words, there's a form of pleading on the part of the Eibishter to Avraham Avinu, asking him that he should stand in this Nisoyan. Didn't he? You have to come close, put yourself on the table, and listen to what we're saying. The whole thing is just very, very almost impossible for the normal mind to picture. First of all, how could Hashem demand this of Avraham Avinu, and how was Avraham Avinu able to bear it? He should have immediately said to the Eibishter, listen, after all my years and everything, now I've got my son, what do you want of me? And yet nonetheless, we don't find, as we'll see in a second. However, comes along Rashi, and Rashi says that Vayi achar advarim ha'ele tends to imply that this all happened after these particular matters. In other words, some particular matters that have a direct relationship to what happened here. Vayi achar advarim ha'ele. The Torah doesn't say that every time, It doesn't say, well, we're now starting a new inyan. It's after these things that happen. It's after certain things that happen means that there must be some near connection between these things, whatever they are, and what's happening immediately now. So the great Meforshim tell us, and Rashi himself mentions in one or two places, that normally when the Torah says that, Vayi achar advorim ha'ele, and then it says this and this took place, it means that there's a close connection in time and in events between the two. So that would imply that maybe there's some relationship with the story about Avimelech and the Beit Chabad that Avraham Avinu had after he met up with Avimelech and everything. Maybe there's some connection between that and the Akedah. So we'll see later on that there's certain opinions that they hold that way, and we'll see a most amazing detail in that opinion which relates to our situation, mamish, today at this moment. But we'll come to that in a minute. We'll keep you, I don't know if anybody feels suspensed about that, but even if he doesn't, then we'll keep it till a bit later. However, comes along Rashi, and Rashi says, what does it mean that all this story of the Akedah happened after Hadvarim Ha'ela, after these matters? What were these matters that happened that can be linked closely with the Akedah, with the commandment of Avraham Avinu that he should offer up his one and only son? Comes along Rashi and he says, Acha advorim ha'ele yesh mirabbeinu eimrim. There are some of our sages who say, Acha advorav shel the Baldova. It's not customary to say the word after the dvorim of the the Baldova. How would you say the devil? I don't know how to call it. He was looking for some way to accuse, make trouble against Avraham Avinu. And he was saying the Mekatrei, he was going around and he was saying, Mikol Asuda Sha'asa Avram, and the whole meal that Avraham Avinu made, Loi Hikriv Lefanecha Par Echad, Oi Eil Echad. Now you remember it was written earlier, considerably in the parasha, that once Avraham Avinu did have Yitzchak and he was born in the world, Avraham Avinu made a big meal. Yas Avraham Mishteh Gadol. He made a big, drinking party. B'yom Higomalas Yitzchak, on the day that Yitzchak finished, nurturing from his mother. That's called Lehigomer. B'yom Higomer Yitzchak. And so Rashi writes over there, I don't know if you guys remember from one day to the other when you learn your chittas, but Rashi writes over there that why is it called a Mishteh Gadoyo, a big party? Because a lot of the big people in the time, the generation, were there. And amongst them was this Avimelech guy. He was also there. Plus other big people that Avraham Avinu invited with the idea of spreading the word and the miracle that Hashem had made, that he had this child in his old age with the whole Riches. So comes along the Mekatrei, and he says, Avraham Avinu made a wonderful Suda, and he gave thanksgiving, and he made a publicity out of the ness that happened, but Lo hikriv lefanecha pa echad oy ayel echad. But he never offered to you one ox or one sheep. Avraham Avinu never saw fit to take out of his flocks. At the time made this tremendous farbrengen, because a mishta means a farbrengen, by the way. A mishta means like a place where people drink, and they say l'chaim. And so he didn't offer even one pa or one ayil. That's not proper. A person like Avraham Avinu so devoted to you, when he should have offered up an offering to you. He should have given an offering for you. Omer lo Benoi, so the Eibishter answered back to the Mekatre, and he said to him, Klum osa ela b'shvil Benoi. He said the whole reason Avraham Avinu made that Suda was for the sake of his son, because he'd had a son, and the whole thing was to announce the greatness of the fact that he'd had a son. He said, even if I were to say to him, you must offer that son now in front of me, then I'm for sure certain that Avraham Avinu would not hold back. If I were to tell him, take that son and offer him up on the altar, I'm sure he would do it. That's what the Eibishter answers back to the Satan. That's what he answers him back. So what happens is, this is a Gemara, Masechta Sanhedrin. The Gemara doesn't even go into the rest of it. You can just imagine what happened. So the Satan said, oh, yes, that's what you say. Okay, let's go ahead and let's see. Let's try him out and let's see if that's the fact what's going to happen. In other words, okay, let's get moving. So that's what Rashi says actually happened beforehand. Now the truth of the matter is that Suda was about 37 years before, because it was when Yitzchak was born, or 35 years before, when Yitzchak was born. So it's a long time. So we have to say that the Satan, according to Rashi, he was hanging around the whole time with this complaint. The whole time he was sort of drifting it around in the divine air, here, there, wherever he could. He dropped into Hashem's ear, literally, this complaint, you see, and it was always ongoing. So therefore, when the moment came, he said, let's get moving. Where is your proof that Avraham Avinu will in effect not hold back his son even from a korban? There's other people. Now the interesting thing is that this Yeshayimrim, the second opinion, well, that is an opinion brought in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, but it's brought with like the whole piece in the middle. It's not brought just one after the other. And the way Rashi brings them is that they're essentially connected one with the other. So that would be more involved in Ashir and the Gemara. Why does Rashi learn the Gemara that way? But anyway, whatever. Rashi brings this other opinion which is mentioned from another direction in the Gemara. Yeshayimrim, that Achad Hadvarim Ha'ele means Achad Dvarav Shel Yishmael. Now Yishmael, he's the other son of Avraham Avinu, that Avraham Avinu had from Hoga HaMitzvah. And he is told by the Eibishter that that's not your real son, even though he's your son, but he's not going to be your real son. And so this Yishmael, Shoheh Mispoya Al Yitzchak. And he used to go around with Yitzchak, and he used to make himself big. How do you say Mispoya? And he used to say, Al Yitzchak Shemal ben Yud Gimel Shana. That Yishmael, at the time of the Milah, when Avraham Avinu made the circumcision, he circumcised everybody. Now Yishmael was 13 years old at the time. Ilu Yitzchak, he was Mal Yitzchak when he was 8 days old. That's according to the laws of the Milah. So there's a difference between somebody who's 8 days old and somebody who was 13 years old when he had the Milah. What's the difference? That somebody who's 13 years old, he really feels what's going on. He really suffers all the sufferings of the Milah. The one who's only 8 days old, he doesn't really, I'm sure he feels it, but he doesn't really know what's going on. So he goes over the pain and the sufferings of the Milah without any difficulty. So therefore Yishmael was saying to Yitzchak, you see, I was already Yud Gimel Shana, V'loi Michan, I didn't complain, I took on myself the Milah, and you see how great I am, I didn't even make any protest. Omaloi Yitzchak, so Yitzchak said to him, Be'eva Echad Ato Yerani. He said, with one limb that you have, with that you're trying to make me scared of you. You're trying to make me have herds for you. You're trying to say that you suffered more pain in that particular limb than what I did. Okay, all right. If the Eibush would have said, if the Eibush would say, tell me that I should offer myself up completely to him, I wouldn't hold back. So in the meantime, we have to say that the SATAN, he was listening into all this as well, according to this pshat. And he went back to the Eibush and he said, this Yitzchak says that if you were to offer him up, or anybody, not necessarily wrong, but he would be prepared to offer himself up completely as a korban to me. So he says to the Eibush, no, let's get cracking and see what will happen. So on that basis, we come to the Akedah, that the Eibush said to Avraham Avinu, please do this. I asked the Shaila, why does Rashi bring those two opinions? And for that matter, why does he bring those inyanim at all? So what is relevant, this whole story that he tells both about Avraham Avinu and about Yitzchak? Because later we can say, if the Eibush wants to try Avraham Avinu, then he can try him. He doesn't need all sorts of build-ups on the part of the SATAN to get him moving. The Eibush wanted to try Avraham, and he could have done it straight, without all this business behind the scenes. And the same with Yitzchak. What do we need all this business with Yishmael? Now, just by the way, this tends to indicate that Yishmael was already what you might call, a sort of quite acceptable guy in Avraham Avinu's household. Because earlier in the Pasha we see Avraham Avinu drove him out. Avraham Avinu wanted him around. And Sarah Imenu said, you must get rid of this Yishmael guy. And Avraham Avinu drove him out. And now we see suddenly he's back and everything. So come along certain people and they say that this is talking after Yishmael did tshuva. Because in next week's Parsha, Rashi says that Yishmael did tshuva. So this is already after Yishmael was already kosher, he'd already done tshuva. Nonetheless, he was saying, you see, I took on myself the milah and you didn't really feel it. I did. So from that we see that ultimately speaking, even after he does tshuva, you can't really trust the Yishmael guy. I don't mean anything chas v'shalom. I'm not being toigim in his tshuva. The fact that he did tshuva, he did tshuva, that's a tremendous thing, and so on and so forth. But we see that something deep inside Yishmael that he never really was able to really come to terms with the fact that there's such a thing as a Avraham Avinu and he's what you might call genuine son, who is Yitzchak. Yishmael couldn't quite come to terms with that, and therefore he was interested in showing that he's really got Maila over Yitzchak, and that led to a tremendous type of accusation on the part of the SATAN. Well, for that we have to bear in mind that nowadays, no matter what good things it might appear that the descendants of Yishmael are prepared to say, you can't really rely on the ultimate benefit, like Abi the Yidden. Who knows what the heck they're really after, and particularly when they say clearly what they're after. But anyway, that's just a side point at the moment. Ask yourself the Shaila, why does Rashi have to bring those two opinions? Why, if he already wants to look into a background and link it up with something which is always going on all the time, just bring one of them, or bring just a general statement that there'd been an accusation against Avraham and therefore the Eibush wanted to show that he would stand in the accusation. Why do you have to bring all this? So that leads us to the famous question, but all of the great Meforshim, and we'll see it briefly as we go ahead. Everybody says that why do we connect this whole trial with Avraham Avinu? Why do we say that the Eibush tried Avraham Avinu? And we say that the greatness of the Akedah was Avraham Avinu, and it's all Avraham Avinu's victory, it's Avraham Avinu's nisayon. And whenever we talk about the numbers of the trials that Avraham Avinu went through, we say that the Akedah was amongst the biggest or the biggest that Avraham Avinu went through. And continuously, and in our prayers, on many occasions when we build on the Akedah, Rashi tells us later on, we'll see about that in a second, that we build on the Akedah as a great and tremendous merit. Therefore, all the generations to come, we always connect with Avraham. It's called the Nisoyan of Avraham Avinu. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya also calls it the Nisoyan of Avraham Avinu. We'll soon see the amazing diuk of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. So everybody asks the question, why isn't it Yitzchak's Nisoyan? Well, the person who's really suffering here is Yitzchak. I mean, he's going to be taken, he's going to have to put his neck out on the mizbeach, have himself slaughtered and burnt away, and he's only a man, 37 years old. Avraham Avinu is already 130, or I said now how old he was, about 137. So, and why is it that the whole greatness is connected with Avraham Avinu? Well, it's the Nisoyan of Yitzchak. He's going to give away his life at such a young life, before he's even had generations, or before he's even began his whole amazing effect on the world, and his whole amazing spiritual career. All of a sudden, he's going to be slaughtered on a mizbeach. So for him to go along, so you might say, well, at the beginning he didn't know about it, but later Rashi tells us in the middle of what was happening, he did begin to realize. He asked Avraham, where's the sheep for the burnt offering? Where's the animal? So Avraham said, oh yes, yes. Yitzchak realized that it really meant him. So at least from a certain point on, Yitzchak went willingly, and Vayeru Shnehem Yahdov, they went together. Rashi says they went together in a united opinion, that they were one together, that they went with one opinion that this is what is going to be done. Isn't that? Excuse me there, a head has to be held without the hands, you understand? A head is able to be supported without hands. Or maybe you just so dreamy you didn't get what I was saying. Anyway, come to it, that Yitzchak L'choira is the one who's the hero of the Nisoyan. And yet, ultimately, we don't really call it the Nisoyan of Yitzchak Avinu. We call it, nonetheless, L'choira, we can say that Rashi, right at the very beginning, showing how the whole thing became a Nisoyan, Rashi indicates that there are two sides to it. That either you can say it's Mitzad Avraham Avinu, there was a kitrug against Avraham. Why didn't you do kach for kach? Why did you offer up this and this? Or there's another way. We can come from the other side, and we can say that Yitzchak Avinu put himself in the whole thing, and it was a kitrug against Yitzchak Avinu. Therefore, it's really his Nisoyan. And so therefore, Rashi, right from the beginning, is indicating that there's really two ways and two nuances of looking at the whole amazing story. The Akedah, the Mitzad Echad, it's Avraham Avinu, of the Mitzad Hasheni, it's Yitzchak. Because he said, Ilu, I was required to offer myself up, I would do it. And that's an amazing statement. And so the SATAN said, okay, let's get cracking, let's do that. And the Amish didn't hold that back either. Is a sign that it's mamish the Nisoyan of Yitzchak Avinu. So we have to ask ourselves, if it's in effect a Nisoyan also of Yitzchak Avinu, why is it the Nisoyan of Avraham Avinu? Why so close up? And the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, in Perek Hey, that Avraham Avinu was tried with 10 nisyonos, 10 trials, Asara nisyonim. And according to all opinions, the last one of those nisyonos is the Akedah. In other words, everybody is masking that the Akedah is Avraham Avinu's nisoyan. Even though there's a whole difference of opinion over there, what are the 10 nisyonos? Very interesting. All sorts of different shittas in the Rambam and in others, what are in effect the 10 trials that Avraham Avinu went through. And Lech Lecha is also one of the trials that he was told to go out of his father's house. And there's a big, fascinating difference of opinion, which is the hardest of all the trials. There's most of the Meforshim hold that the Akedah is the hardest. But there's one opinion that holds that Lech Lecha Me'artzecha, when you were told to go out of your father's house and leave everything behind and just go, well, that was the hardest of all the initiations. In other words, it's not easy just to leave everything behind and just keep walking and had to go looking for the Eivishter and requesting the truth in the world and giving away what looks to be all the, what you might call the stability and the satisfaction that you had in your life in your father's house, or everything that was connected with it, whatever Beis Avicha, the house, the father's house, may mean. Because in Pnimis Advarim it doesn't mean Dafki, your father's house, but it means everything connected with that type of entity. So therefore, Lech Lecha is also a tremendous Nisoyan. But the majority of people hold that the Akedah is the hardest of all the Nisoyan. So what Rashi is showing is that it's Avraham Avinu's Nisoyan, but it's also Yitzchak Avinu's Nisoyan. Deep inside, you have to say that Yitzchak Avinu also went through an unbelievable trial here, and it's his Nisoyan. So why is it then that we connect it with the union of Avraham Avinu principally, despite the fact that Yitzchak Avinu, I will soon come back to the fact that it's really both people's Nisoyan. But the next couple of Rashis are also of interest to us. Just one Rashi where Rashi says that the Avish said, Kach no, please stay. And that doesn't alter the fact that this was a tzivui to Avraham Avinu. But nonetheless, it was a commandment. Nonetheless, he says, Kach no. So Rashi says that Ein no ela loshet bakosha. That no means please, I'm asking you. Omaloi bevakosha mincha. Yeah, please, I'm asking of you, amoid bezeh hanisoyen. Please stand through this nisoyen. I know it's very, very difficult, but I want you to stand it over. Shaloi yoimru, in order that the world shouldn't say harushoyna is loy hoyo behen mami. The people shouldn't say the first nisyonos that you went through don't really have anything special in them. They ain't behem mamish. They don't have any material, and therefore it was easy to stand over those. When it came to something really genuine, you backed out. And therefore he said, oh no, this one not. Therefore I'm asking you to stand in this one. But otherwise the world will taina and will say that the other nisyonos, I mean, what do you mean? The other nisyonos, they didn't have anything in them at all. According to some of people's opinions, the first nisoyon was when Avraham Avinu threw himself into the what do you call it, the furnace of fire over there by Nimrei. And the Rambam doesn't learn that that's a nisoyon. Because the Rambam apparently holds that the nisyonos only begin when Avraham Avinu had a direct connection with Hashem, and he was already getting direct prophecies from Hashem, that when you're told by Hashem to do things and it doesn't look good, then that's a nisoyon. But when you do things of your own, then that's not really the emerson idea of a nisoyon. But nonetheless, who would say that Avraham Avinu just did things that weren't really meaningful? They didn't really have any sort of real, material in them. I mean, what does Rashi mean by that? What does he mean by saying? Otherwise, people will just say that, oh, he's a nice fellow, and he had very highfalutin activities, and he was very open. But that's not really anything. So, comes along certain people, and they want to say that what's the greatness of Avraham Avinu in this whole nisoyen, and B'klal, what's the whole idea of a nisoyen? What does it mean that the Eibishter tries out a person? What would you say about it? You wouldn't. So put your book on the table and pay attention. So what does it mean, a nisoyen, that the Eibishter has to try somebody? I mean, the Eibishter knows everything. He knows what you're doing now. He also knows, to a certain extent, what you're going to do afterwards. And what does he have to try you for? So it comes along the Ramban, and the Ramban says in a very big, basic nakuda, and he says that the Eibusha tries you. It doesn't mean that he doesn't know and he's trying you out to see what's going to happen. Now the Eibusha does it be'ikar for the benefit of the person that he's trying. And he presents him with a situation whereby he's got to be a living example of everything he held. This is an amazing idea. In other words, highfalutin ideas we all have. Elevated ideas as to what should really be, we all have. And real devotion to Hashem, we all would like to be. We all hold that that's what we should be, etc., etc. However, says the Ramban, there's a difference between what you really hold and what you really do. And sometimes you can hold the highest of things, but when you've really got to live that papoil, it's got to be done in action, then you get hesitated. So it says the Ramban, a trial is where you've got to live what you hold, even to the point of extremity, even to the point where it looks almost as if you can't figure why on earth you should be doing that. But nonetheless, you've got to make sure that what you hold and your action, poel, is all one thing. And that's why the Eibusha tries you. He wants to see the real things that you hold and inside yourself. You say, oh yes, I really hold to the extreme point that I believe in Hashem and I'm devoted to Him and Okay, let's see how far you really are prepared to go, and therefore we try a person. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that what he holds inside will come out into action, b'poil. Now when you think about it, it's a very profound idea, because all of us are probably somewhere or another guilty of thinking about all sorts of high and believing about ourselves all sorts of high things. Oh yes, we really this and we really that. What about if you really had to get cracking and really have to do it in action? What would it look like? Would it be as profound as all that, or maybe it might be watered down a little bit? And therefore, says the Ramban, the whole Indian of a nisoyin, of a trial, is for the person. Not that the Eibusha really needs to try. It comes along the Saporno, when he was a very great Rabbeinu Avadia Saporno, but he was later than the Ramban. He was also a Rishon, and he says, B'derech Ramban, he brings the Ramban, and then he says we could say that what the Ramban means with this idea of poyel. We learned in Samavok, I don't think there's anybody here from the time when we learned that in Samavok. We have some guys that learned with me Samavok. But at the very beginning of the Hemshech, the Rebbe Ashab writes over there that by the Eibusha there's no difference between potential and action. In other words, that potential and action by the Eibusha are the same thing. By a man, there's a difference between what he could potentially do and what he does, or there's a difference in time between them. But by the Eibusha, it's immediate. If anything occurs to Hashem, then immediately that is in effect matziyah. It's not that Hashem thinks about something and then does it. If he thinks it automatically is matziyah. So that was at the support of the whole idea of an emes, nisoyin, is to make you like your maker. And he said that the whole purpose of the creation was to make man that he should be like the Eibusha. And that's what we see, that at the beginning of creation, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmeinu kitmuseinu, that the Eibusha said, let's make man in our image and in our form. And that was the point of when you live through an nisoyin, like the Ramban says, you bring your potential into action, so there's no difference between them. The potential and what you do in action are mamish one thing, or that makes you like the Eibusha, or that performs the perfection of how you were created. It's an amazing idea. It's a sign that life is not easy. In order to reach proper perfection, you've got to go through these inyonim of trials. Ad kedikach. So the Alter Rebbe says in the Likutei Torah, look it up. You'll see in P Vayeira, the Alter Rebbe writes in the Torah that the whole reason we come into the world was in order to have trials. And if you didn't have trials, if you didn't have a trial, at least one of them or something of them, then you didn't really come into the world. Your neshama is still floating around some high world. Only when you have a trial, that's a sign that you came into the world and you went to be here. So according to the Sapona, it's very good that the reason you have to come into the world is you've got to make sure that all potential things that you hold by, they should be real. And that compares you to the Creator. And then you get back to that union with Him that He meant right from the beginning. It's an unbelievable concept. So it comes along and says, okay, a trial is where you're demanded of something that you hold, that this is the way it should be. And so David says, okay, let's see, you come into Poyo. Make sure that you're real and that you're full-fledged and the things you hold by, that they come into action. Over the whole union of the Nesoyan here, of the Akedah, that's got another aspect to it. It's another aspect where Hashem seems to contradict Himself. The Abishah said at the beginning, Yitzchak's going to be your only thing. This is going to be the case with you. You're going to have generations, and you're going to have thousands and thousands of generations. All and He comes along to, and He says to him, Kach Noah's bincha, and offer him up as a core. So Amos, later on, Rashi says the Abishah didn't really mean it. He only meant to put him up, but not really to burn him, or to do it. I find a whole big series of lumdus that really the Abishah didn't really tell him to do that. Now the reason Rashi says that, because otherwise it would be a case where the Abishah Mamish changed his mind. He said one thing and he really repeatedly told another thing. But the point is that Avraham Avinu didn't know that diuk. Avraham Avinu thought it was real. That's the point. In other words, as far as Avraham Avinu is concerned, he thought that you really have to offer up Yitzchak on the Mizbeach. That's an Nesoyan, which is, as they call it, that's in what you call in Pufikarain. That's mamish in how they call it, the old saying in Yiddish. That's a stomach punch. It's a blow, mamish. That blows all possible ideas. The Abishah says one thing and later he tells you to do exactly different. Yeah, the opposite. Well, that's very hard going. That's the union of the Nesoyan of the Akedah. The Nesoyan of the Akedah is, so how did Avraham get through the Nesoyan? How did he live through the Nesoyan? L'choira, he could have said, listen here, Abishah. And he even did say it later, but he didn't say it out. He just thought it. And then he said to the Abishah quietly, he said, listen, there's a lot of contradictions here. There's a Rashi later on when he said, the Abishah tells him not to do it, then he thought, wait a minute, what if you don't do it? I got this far. And now don't do it. You'll see a Rashi over there. Rashi brings that. But that's already after the whole thing's happened. We're talking about the actual Nesoyan itself. So, comes along certain people, and they want to add to it even more. And they want to say that the Nesoyan and the Akedah has also got another aspect to it that's different than the other Nisyonim. For example, Avraham Avinu threw himself, if we'll say that's on the Nisyonim, the Rambam doesn't hold that that's on the Nisyonim. And Avraham Avinu threw himself into the Kivshin or age. He threw himself into the furnace. Or he went out of his father's house, Lech Lechom Yatzchom. Or other inyonim, that were brought down as the Nisyonim.
The Rambam doesn't hold the Akedah.
No, he holds a different Nisyonim. He holds differently, he numbers the Nisyonim differently. He holds it the first Nisyonim is Lech Lechom. And everybody else holds it there's only about 3 Nisyonim before that. It's very interesting. Anyway, whatever. So it comes along certain people and they say that up to now, all these Nisyonim, even if we'll say that throwing himself into the fire was one of the Nisyonim. But not everybody holds that, but let's say. That's all where, to a certain extent, it's got to do with things that didn't involve you getting up and doing something which mamish changes the whole flow of everything Hashem has ever said, and changes, as it were, the flow of normal, what you might call behavior, according to how Hashem wants it in the world. To just get up and slaughter somebody, I mean, that's a tremendously mind-boggling thing. And to do it, aware of the fact that the same Abish already told you, mamish hafuk mizeh, absolute opposite. Now that's a doing, a creating of a situation in the world where you are going actively into a situation which contradicts everything. Totally in your. You threw yourself into the fire. You threw yourself into the fire. That's your doing in a way. Also, it's got a certain trace of that. But as we said before, some people hold that wasn't even on the Tzoya. It's mind-boggling, the whole thing of this Nesoya. So it comes along. The Alter Rebbe had a famous colleague by the Maggid who was called the Pinchas Baal HaFloah. The Pinchas Baal HaFloah, he and another great Talmud of the Maggid were brothers. Just like we find there were two other brothers. You heard of the other famous brothers, the Rebbe Elimelech Milizhensky and the Rebbe Zushia Mianipola, the Rebbe Zushia and the Rebbe Elimelech were brothers. But there were two other brothers by the Maggid, and that was the Rebbe Shmuel Shmelkis. Minikushberg, he's called, that's his name, Rebbe Shmuel. Shmuel is Minikushberg. And the Rebbe Pinchas Baal HaFloah, they were brothers. And later the Rebbe Pinchas Baal HaFloah, he became a Rav in Frankfurt. It was in those days, that was in Germany, Frankfurt. But it was a very, very big Rabbanus in the whole of Europe. Pnei Yeshua, you heard of the Pnei Yeshua? Yeah? You're getting into longer, so you'll have to meet up with Pnei Yeshua. The Pnei Yeshua, he was a Rav also in Frankfurt. So the Pinchas Baal HaFloah was the Alter Rebbe's a very close chava. There's a letter that we have that the Alter Rebbe wrote to the Pinchas Baal HaFloah, and he calls him Moiri V'Rabbi. He calls him my teacher. The Alter Rebbe refers to him as my teacher. In other words, he was a bit older than the Alter Rebbe. He was an amazing, unbelievable person. So the Pinchas Baal HaFloah, he wrote a sefer on the Torah called Ponim Yofis, and the Alter Rebbe brings it down. The Alter Rebbe quotes it in L'Kutei Torah. By the way, it's very fascinating that in the sefer Torah and L'Kutei Torah, if you look very carefully, you'll find that the Alter Rebbe quotes in different ways a lot of his colleagues that he had in his time by the Mezritch Maggid. But you've got to sort of look and find them, but they're there. He quotes the Ponim Yofis from the Baal HaFloah, the Pinchas Baal HaFloah. So the Pinchas Baal HaFloah says that the whole Indian of the Nesoyin, the Akedah, and for that matter, previous Nisyonos also, but to bring Avraham Avinu to what we call Tmimus. Have you ever heard the expression Tmimus? Tomchei Tmimim. You guys are learning in a yeshiva called Tomchei Tmimim. You're only learning in Or Tmimim as a name, but you're learning in Tomchei Tmimim. Because the Rebbe said that this yeshiva is Tomchei Tmimim. What does it mean, a Tomim? Have you got any idea? You know what it means, the word Tomim?
It's an angel.
Huh?
It's an angel.
What's that?
It's like an angel.
Angel? Boy, okay.
That's what it is in modern Hebrew.
No. Maybe the angel, angels are Tomim, but maybe I didn't get you right. You said angel? No. I really can't find myself to agree with that. Yeah?
Is it complete?
Very nice. That's getting closer to it. Tomim is somebody that is complete or perfect. Complete, how do you call it, simply shaped. He's not simple. Okay, don't fly out of your plane because you happen to give a good answer. It means something which is simple or shaped fully. That's what it means, atomic. So Tmimos doesn't just mean that you're how do you call it, a goylum. Some people say, oh, he's a little bit of a tomim, then they misuse the word tomim. You'll hear it in everyday language, and that means that he's a little bit sort of simple. He doesn't really ask any questions because he doesn't really have much to ask. So he's called a bit of a Tomim. He's Chalila, that's not what the Rebbe Hashem meant when he meant a Tomim. He meant that somebody who even has great knowledge and he even has great hasoga, but he has the ability to put himself out of that hasoga. He has the ability to use the hasoga only to enrich him on a certain basic level. But he has the ability to put himself out of the hasoga and act as if he were just a simple person believing unconditionally in everything Hashem does. And that's the idea of a Tomim. That's the idea of Tmimah. And therefore we see that the people that the Rebbe Hashem educated in the first Lubavitch yeshiva, with this yeshiva is a continuation of that to this very day, and that's the way we're trying to educate you guys, is that you have to know things, you have to learn Chassidus, you have to learn about Hashem, but that's only to help you and that assists you, and that gives you an ability to enrich your life in such a way that when you will be a Tomim, you'll do it all of your own choice and your own knowledge as well. In other words, then you'll be a Tomim with much more drive because you'll be giving yourself into perfection and simplicity with more punch, because you know, in fact, what is really the issue or what are the issues. But you will approach them in a way as if you ask no question. You're simple, you're complete and straightforward. So it comes along to Pinchas Balafla and he says that the whole inyan of the secret of Avraham Avinu is Tmimus. Now that's a very amazing thing because it's brought down in Chassidus later on that in effect he's right. That in effect is the case. And therefore in davening every day when we mention Avraham Avinu, we say that Vayevorech David es Hashem, and we say this and this and this, and we say you are the one that chose Avraham, and you took him out of Ur Kasdim, you took him out of this place where he had all the trouble with Nimrod, and then Umotzosa es Levove Ne'amon Lefonecha. You found his heart faithful in front of you. So the great Meforshim say that finding the heart of Avraham Avinu faithful in front of you, that is the idea of Tmimus. That is the concept that despite all the other great things we mentioned in that pasuk that Avraham Avinu did, what the Eibishter found was he found a faithful and what you might call devoted and simple heart. In other words, at the Pinchas Balafla it says that the secret of the Indian of the Akedah is that Avraham Avinu reached Tmimus in perfection, because he saw all these unbelievable contradictions and things which are happening. How on earth could he do that? How could he just go ahead and do things which they were absolute contradictions in what Hashem told him himself? Only if you're in a form of a Tmimus, you reach the level of what's called Atomim, and you're absolute Tmimus, then you go ahead, even though things may look at the beginning to be a contradiction. You might say, well, what do you have from that? What are wrong to get out of it altogether? So we see that in the end, the Eibishter indicated to Avraham Avinu that sof kol sof, he didn't really mean the occasion. I mean, he did, but he didn't. And so what happens through that Tmimus and through that perfect faith and that simplicity that an educated and elevated person puts himself into, despite his knowledge, and that knowledge helps him to be like that, and to be simple and devoted and faithful in his heart to the Eibishter, well, that causes that later on everything opens up in front of him, and he begins to know such inyonim that he would never have possibly known before. And that's what the Sopranos says, that the whole thing is for your sake. And therefore, if we look in the Torah later on in Sefer Devarim, where it tells us that you must be ready for trial, it could be that you're going to be tried. Then it's written, Ki Manasseh Hashem Elokechem Eschem Lo Da'as, that the Eibishter is going to try you in order to know. So comes along the Friedrich Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, and that Maimon, the Friedrich Rebbe, and Maimon Toshim, much more barichas, and they say that there's no such thing that the Eibishter has to know. That's what the Ramban told us right from the beginning. The Eibishter doesn't have to know what you're going to do. No, the whole inyan of the trying of you is that you should come to Das. Ki menashe Hashem elokechem. Eschem lo das means that you will come to Das. You will come to a new binding up and a new iskashus. Das means iskashus in Hashem, where you will know things incomparably deeper, and you'll be aware of divinity in all of your inyonim incomparably more than what you would have been had you not had the trial. How are you going to have the trial and come to such an incomparable tamimus that you've got to be strong at the first moment of the trial? And so therefore says the Alter Rebbe over there, in that mimer, and it's brought down, it echoes for all the generations. Normally speaking, when you're given any in life, then Yiddishkeit demands that we enter that in and we understand it, and we evaluate it, we clear it up and we fix it up and we come to a decision al pi Torah. No, he said with an Nisoyan it's not like that. An Nisoyan appears to you in the form of a contradiction that doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever, even to you as a faithful person. You at the moment that it hits you, then you say, what is that? In other words, it looks to be a contradiction to everything that you understood and everything you know for, everything you expected, or maybe everything you could rightfully expect, according to the Shur HaTzedek. And that's the whole inyan that Avraham Avinu was faced with a whole bunch of contradictions. And not only that, the Rashi says that it came to him through a kitru. It came to him through people, the SATAN is not a people, but it came through a force. But the whole inyan of that force is to make difficulties, is to look for trouble and to create accusations which are not fair. Why are they not fair? Because Avraham Avinu didn't have any tzivui in those days to bring a korban. Noach did bring a korban. Noach offered up a korban on the Mizbeach. So it's brought down that he did that out of his own free will. And on the contrary, he took 7, like we mentioned in our shir a couple of weeks ago, he had 7 different pure animals, so he realized that there has something to do with the Eibishter, and he offered up a korban. Oh, but it's not because he was obliged to do so. And if Avraham, he didn't have to offer off a korban. On the contrary, he spread the word that he'd had a miraculous child amongst all these big knobs like Avimelech and all these other guys. And that was Avraham Avinu's way of doing it. The accuser doesn't look at it that way. He said, nah, forget it. He should have offered you a korban. In other words, also not a thing that makes sense, but it comes in the form of like a contradiction. It blows. If people who hear that wrongly would think badly, at least temporarily, about Avraham Avinu. And that's a part of what a Nisoyan is. It's not fair. It doesn't make sense. And it hits the guy in a way that he can say rightfully, what do they want of me here? And therefore, the answer to that is right from the very first moment, that you must deal with yourself, not with the Nisoyan. The Nisoyan doesn't make sense, and it was sent by the Eibishter in a way it shouldn't make sense. And he wants it not to make sense. What he wants you to do is to bring out deeper things in yourself that B'derech Mamela will cause the Nisoyan to just, become cancelled. Because Hashem only did it in order to make you dig deeper into yourself. And to come to a higher level of iskashus with him, and B'derech Mamela, the Nisoyan will just float away, like we saw here. When Avraham Avinu got to the moment that he was about to slaughter Yitzchak, then all of a sudden the Malach said to him, oh, that's not really what we meant from heaven. Even to the point that Avraham Avinu said, wait a minute, I've reached such a point, let me do something. If you read the Rashi, you'll see later on. The flow of the Dveikus and the enthusiasm that Avraham Avinu reached was so immense that he couldn't stop, as it were. He already wanted to go ahead. He was so committed to the idea. And Abe said, no, that's not what we meant. So how do you reach such a madrega? It says the Pinchas Balafla, that you have to be atomim. You have to reach the madrega for tmimus. You have to be able to put off all that you know and be simple and complete and, as it were, one perfection of simplicity with the Eibishter, and that allows all the inyanim to eventually fall away, and then even Hashem reveals to you such things you didn't possibly dream that you would have come to the Indian of Da'as. And then you probably heard the Alter Rebbe had a Rebbe, he was called Reb Mendele Horodocke. Have you ever heard of him? Reb Mendele Vitebska. But the Reb Mendele Vitebska, he was one of the elder medium of the Magid, and the Alter Rebbe knew him, and the Alter Rebbe, after the Istalkus of the Magid, the Alter Rebbe treated Reb Mendele Vitebska as his Rebbe, even though they were like sort of colleagues in a way. But nonetheless, the Alter Rebbe felt that he was more senior as a student of the Magid than he, and the Alter Rebbe took him on as his Rebbe. You know the whole story about how the Alter Rebbe went a couple of years to Reb Mendele Vitebska as a Rebbe. And then the reason why that stopped and the Alter Rebbe became the Rebbe in the whole of Russia at that time was because Reb Mendele Vitebska went, of all things, he went to Eretz. Well, you know the whole story. He went with 300 peoples, and he made a Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And he's buried, so-called, whatever that means, in Tiberia. That's where he lived. After he came to Eretz Yisrael, he made this famous Aliyah, together with a whole group of other Rabbonim and Talmidei HaMagid and their Talmidim and their families, and altogether something like 300 families came to Eretz Yisrael. And had it not been for that, then he would have stayed in Europe. The Alter Rebbe would have been second to him. The Alter Rebbe considered that he had the right to the seniority of the leadership. And the Alter Rebbe wanted to go with him. I don't know the story. The Alter Rebbe wanted to go with him to Eretz Yisrael. And he followed him across Europe. And the Reb Mendele Vitebska had a dream. He had a dream where the angel said to him, you must tell Zalmanu, as they called him, but they used to call the Alter Zalmanu, that you must tell him that he has to go back, that he doesn't belong in Eretz Yisrael. You do, but he not. Not that he doesn't belong, but that's not his in it. He mustn't go, but you, yeah. And so the Mendele Vitebska told the Alter Rebbe he should go back. But the whole big Arithas, Hasipur, the whole tremendous story in the matter. However, suffice it to say, there at Mendele Vitebska, he also deals with the same Kashia. Yeah, what's the decision of a Nisoyan, and what's the decision of the Nisoyan, Al-Qaeda? It seems to like contradict everything. So he says that the greatness of a Nisoyan is to try your Emunah. That's what he says. He said it's to be Megala in you a new level of Emunah. Well, we already hinted at that. But he said that what does it mean, genuine Emunah? So he said the Indian is it the pshat that Avraham Avinu had a lot of kashyas, and he just fought them and he put them aside and he didn't ask them? Oh, but deep inside he had a lot of kashyas. He just didn't ask them. Or does it mean that Avraham Avinu brought himself to such a point that he never even heard the kashyas? He would never even have dreamt in his mind that there was a kasha here. So he says that that's the greatness of Avraham. And that's what Avraham Avinu teaches us, that you have to go ahead in your day-to-day service of Hashem, that you would never dream of asking a shayla. Now that's an amazing idea. That you're so devoted that even if there's a genuine shayla in Seichel, you would never ask it. And it's not that you would ask it, but you put it aside. Just Mulchatchila, you're in such a madrega that it wouldn't occur to you. And he said that is the greatness of Avraham Avinu. That's what Avraham Avinu gives down to all the generations, and that is Jewish faith. I looked it up in the place where it's written in Mendele Vitebska, and he said that is the Indian what Avraham Avinu gave to the Yidden in all the generations. And our faith is such a faith that we don't even ask any shilas. We just keep going, and but the moment the shilas fall away if they're there. That's an amazing thing, because tmimus means you don't ask for shilas. I suppose tmimus also in a way implies that. But the Mendele Horodocke, that was what he was called by the Chassidim, the Mendele Horodocke. He says that Malachatchila, the Emunah, is so complete that Malachatchila you don't have any shilas. And that the greatness of the whole Nisoyan, the Akedah, was that Avraham Avinu never for a moment dreamt that he would ask any question. He never even bothered about the fact that there was a contradiction. Dave just said, Kach. Take Yitzchak and slaughter him. Take Yitzchak and slaughter him. Shalom Aleichem. Huh?
The question never even entered his mind when it was such a fantastic.
I'm telling you, so I can't hear. We'll have to talk after the talk. In Lamela, the Fizeh komt is that the Tmimus that's described by the Pinchas Barafleur reaches a much higher description in the words of the Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, that it becomes an union of not thinking for a moment in the opposite direction. Lo yihira klal uklal. The Fizeh komt that the union of Amida Benisoyain is that the person indicates to Hashem that he's one with him under any circumstances, no matter what may appear to be the case, what the Seichel might be able to ask. Here we are, one together, and we just keep moving ahead. Beli lintois yamin small, not going left or right or left. So the calls there. We have to ask the original Shaila. It's Yitzchak's, it's his Nisoyan, and not the Nisoyan of Avraham Avinu. Why is it that we keep putting it into Avraham Avinu and not into Yitzchak? So it seemed to me I had a beer of that. It came into my mind a teretz of that, and then later when I looked in a place, I found that one of the great Achronim, the Marshal. The Marshal, he was a Rabbeinu Shlomo Luria. He was a great uncle of the Arizal. And he wrote a Pirush al Hashas. He wrote a Pirush called the Chokmah Shlomo. It's in the Shas at the back. Underneath the Marshal, you'll see a Pirush called the Chokmah Shlomo. That was written by this Marshal, and he was a great uncle of the Arizal. Because his name was Luria, and so was the Arizal. His name was also Lulia. And he says a most amazing thing. And it occurred to me that this is probably the Pirush Padova of I found that he says Mamish Oysa Hadova. He says exactly the same thing. And he says like this. The inner of Yitzchak Avinu was that he was demanded to offer himself up on the Mizbeach and after he found out and allow himself to be killed. So, for a person like Yitzchak Avinu, that's not such a big deal. Even though it sounds pretty hefty. But for a person like Yitzchak Avinu, well, that is what you might call not a big deal. Now, why do I say that? Because you may have heard the famous story that you heard about the Beis Yosef. You know, one who wrote the Shulchan Aruch. He wrote a book because he used to talk with an angel, you know, he used to have these conversations with a malach, you know about it. And he wrote a book where he writes down all the conversations he had with this angel that used to visit him, the Beis Yosef. By the way, now that Shemitah, we also have a whole thing with the, you know about the machlokes between the Misnagdim and the other Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. There's a certain psach at the Beis Yosef when I get to Shemitah, which we follow. When I say we, it depends who you are, because he was the Rav in Eretz Yisrael, the Beis Yosef was the Rav, and he paskin. There was a certain great authority that differed with him, but he wasn't the Rav. And he held a certain thing, and it comes right down to this very time in which we live. That there's a difference between the Misnagdim and some other people as to what should be the conduct during the Shemitah year. And it all goes back to the Beis Yosef. Anyway, so why does it say that Beis Yosef writes that quite early in his life he told the angel that he would like to be burnt on Kiddush Hashem. That's what he states. That he says he would like very much to give away his life on Kiddush Hashem. So it's just in cold blood, it's written in the Sefer. So the angel says to him, oh, yours, this is, of course, yeah, this is great. Prepare yourself. We'll arrange it in a short time. There'll be some situation where you'll be able to just yourself into the fire, give away your life. So the Beis Yosef, very pleased, he said, oh, thank you. I say, it's the conversation between the Beis Yosef and the angel. So it goes through a few weeks, and the Beis Yosef says to the angel, he says, no, where is it? What's happening? When am I going to give away my life on Kiddush Hashem? So the angel says to him, oh, listen, by the way, I'm sorry, but in heaven it's been decided that it's not going to happen. So Beis Yosef says, what? Yeah, are you serious? They said, yes, I am. It's not going to happen. And he said, why? Because you don't remember you had a little fault one day that you didn't cut for cut and you made a little mistake. So for that reason, you decided that you're not going to be burnt al Kiddush Hashem. Beis Yosef is very disappointed, but he takes the ruling and he just goes ahead. So the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, what does he do is, here the Beis Yosef wants to offer himself up on Kiddush Hashem. And by him it's a tremendous joy that he's going to have such an unbelievable schus. All of a sudden they say, no, there's one little thing that you didn't really, it's really amazing. I just haven't got the time to go into the whole thing. But it doesn't seem very significant at all. And I said, no, because you did that, therefore you missed out. So the Rebbe said, no, that's not the real story. That's a little ila in it, just to give the Beis Yosef a reason, that he's got to realize it's not going to happen. But why didn't it really happen, says the Rebbe? Because if the Beis Yosef would have been burnt on Kiddush Hashem, Hashem Yishmereinu, then we wouldn't have the Shulchan Aruch. We wouldn't have all the things, all the unbelievable things for all the other Yidden that the Beis Yosef had to do in the world would never come about. So the Rebbe said that's more important than the personal perfection of the Beis Yosef. But he saw his personal perfection. If you asked him, what would you like to do to be perfect? He said, I'd like to give away myself from Kiddush Hashem. I understand that. I could do it before it. And also, Siddur brings down that Rabbi Akiva and the Eibush Gebatet Kachoya. Rabbi Akiva said his whole life he wants to, and that's what happened to him. Yeah. Rabbi Akiva said all his life he wants to offer himself up on Kiddush Hashem. And that's what we find by many great tzaddikim. In other words, somebody who really is completely out of this world, only devoted to Hashem, for him it's not such an unbelievable thing to give us on the contrary. It's a tremendously positive thing. And without what Yitzchak gave himself away is an unbelievable achievement, but it can be imagined that Yitzchak would want to do that anyway. And that Yitzchak would see in that a certain perfection. Of Avraham Avinu, listen, what's your trouble? Either you move out or you stay out. Is that Avraham Avinu, he's got a much greater problem here. Avraham Avinu would be left without a son. So the Marshal says that for somebody like Avraham Avinu, with all the promises that he'd had about having a son, for him to be left without a son, that is the most terrible thing that we could possibly imagine. And that would mean a wound for the whole rest of his whole existence that would know no end. It would just keep going and going and going. And therefore, the trial that Avraham Avinu faced, apart from the fact that it's also a contradiction with everything that was said from before, that is an unbelievable trial. Yitzchak could be that he would have seen it Malchatchila to be a perfection in his life anyway. And he would have anyway said, okay, let's get moving. No problem with him. And therefore, it's written that when he found out, he went happily. He said, oh yeah. he went happily with Avraham Avinu. Amamela, that's a most amazing answer. And it follows that Yitzchak went through an Nisoyen, but he went through an Nisoyen that he would have anyway probably wanted for himself, ultimately. Therefore, Avraham Avinu was going through an Nisoyen absolutely in what I call a knife in the tongue. It was absolutely the breakage of all possible things that he could have imagined. And therefore it's Avraham Avinu's Nisoyen, and it's not Yitzchak's. And after became Avraham Avinu reached this unbelievable perfection of Tamimut, and even more than that, of Amunah Shleima, and even more than that he dealt only with himself, and he brought out new strength and new koiches, that he would be completely beyond the whole thing. And as remember, the Haradoka said he would never even dream. The question would never have occurred to him. So you might say, that, well, what's all that got to do with what he had occurred to, as they say, with the price of fish? What's it got to do with things how we are nowadays? So it's a very fascinating deal. I just want to bring that down and then we'll finish off. That Rashi brings down later when Hashem said to Avraham Avinu, stop, don't go ahead. And we said Avraham Avinu was already so full of the enthusiasm that he got into. He said, what am I going to do? So I took that Avraham Avinu, when he stopped, he said, Yehi Rotzen, it should be considered as if I had done this and if I had done that and this. And then he said it should be considered as if Yitzchak were a heap of ashes. In other words, he'd been burnt. But he wasn't actually a heap of ashes. We would see it. But then later on, Rashi brings, right at the end, Rashi brings a Yerushalmi, where the Yerushalmi says, that why is it the whole time that we have such unbelievable benefit from the Akedah? We always pray, we always mention the unbelievable merit of the Akedah. Yeah, so the Yerushalmi says, because the pile of ash of Yitzchak's body stands for all the generations and brings us a tremendous merit. So everybody asks, but there's no pile of ash because Yitzchak didn't get burned. I mean, he's okay. He went to be, but then he got off and everything was okay. What do you mean that there's a pile of ash of Yitzchak's burnt body that learns and teaches all the generations to come to this unbelievable merit for the Jewish people? So the Rebbe said that according to that we have to say that even though Rashi himself doesn't hold that way, but Rashi brings a Yerushalmi to show us that in effect he was really burned. And so according to the Yerushalmi, the most unbelievable thing happened. That really the Eibishter let it happen. That Yitzchak actually got slaughtered and he burned. He burned on the fire. And nonetheless the Eibishter brought him back to life. Nonetheless, so really what happened with the whole Akedah was Bedugmas Tchias HaMeisim. That in effect Yitzchak did actually, it's an amazing idea. In other words, he did actually burn, and there's a whole pile of his ash which is still there. And Yitzchak is walking around. There's two Yitzchak. There's one pile of ash, and then there's Yitzchak himself. They're walking around. Most unbelievable thing. Really, that pile of ash, well, that's what in other words, that means for us more than what the Levitic Yitzchak. So the Rebbe said, that the Akedah is the most unbelievable thing. Everything happened, and Avraham Avinu got his way, and Yitzchak got his way, everybody got his way, and nonetheless Eibishter brought him back. And nonetheless, Yitzchak came back. Well, that's an inyan of Tchias HaMeisim. In fact, we can say that the whole inyan of the Akedah of Avraham Avinu is like a story just before the final, and this is the final thing that Avraham Avinu was faced with. This was the last of the trials. So we can suggest that's what we're living through right now. We're living through the last of the trials. We're going through the last of all the trials before Mashiach is going to come. Because what is happening right now is things that could never have been believed in the most wild imagination. I'm not talking about Yidden. That Yidden would take the holy city and give it away to Goyim. Mamish Kipshuta. Never think such a thing. Avraham Avinu offered up his son on Har Moriah. So Rashi says that is Yerushalayim. So just imagine, Avraham Avinu would say, oh yes, I'm offering up my son. There's some Meshuggah Goy over there. It's a Medina which Lawrence of Arabia made it. It never existed. More than 80 or 90 years ago, it never existed. This whole Meshuggah Jordan and all these places, they never existed. Oh no, I got to give it all away to them. And they'll put up their Meshuggah flag over the Holy of Holies, over the Kodesh HaKadosh. That's what is going to happen, unless something prevents it. So I mean, you just dry up because you're Meshuggah. You think if you join the army, you're going to help yourself or help somebody else. Once upon a time I also held that. But nowadays I don't. Because the army is going to be used to drive the Yidden out of Eretz Yisrael. Only for that. And that's what he says clearly, this war criminal that he's in charge of the country. That's what he said. We're living in the last terrible nisoyim of the Golan. It doesn't make any sense. It just can't possibly be. And it's happening in front of our eyes. And nobody says anything. You got thousands and thousands and thousands of Fruma Yidden with beards and with longer tzitzis, and I go twice as long. Tzitzis that mamish hit the earth. And tefillin with the Kreismit was with all the Hidurim, there's no end to it. And they walk around, they don't say anything about anything. Or they say to the so-called war criminal, and maybe you can give me a few bucks. And then I'll let you give away Yerushalayim also. That is the most unbelievable nisoyim. That's a nisoyim she'ein k'mo. It doesn't make any sense. As a matter of somebody who holds with the Rebbe and holds with Kedushin, holds with the Alinu, he can't live that truth. It's just a contradiction of everything that's ever been said. So what are we supposed to do? We have to be like Avraham Avinu. We just have to go with the pshitas, and we just have to say it's not going to happen. Exactly how that's going to be basically. Or we have to go with the pshitas. We just have to face the Nisoyan, but not give into it. And not say, oh yeah, maybe we have to reckon with this a bit, maybe there's a point, chas v'sholem v'chas v'chalilah. And what the end of it is, the end of it is Tchias HaMesim. The end of it is that there'll be Moshiach and there'll be things which don't make any sense at all. Yitzchak got burnt according to the Yerushalmi. He was burnt on the Mizbeach. And a few minutes later he's there. And he came back into the whole life with Avraham Avinu. What are you doing? But then does it Tchias HaMesim in the highest and simplest form. That you got all these people, that so-called people say they've been buried and they're going to the woods and they're going to be alive in Lebanon. Allah is coming to become a tzadikei emes that they're alive in Lebanon Baruch. Anyway, they're alive in Lebanon. We've got to realize that this is the story in which we are now. Everything seems to make no sense. Avraham Avinu just keeps going with the pshitas, and he says, we want Moshiach now. So he talked to some people, they don't know what to say, and they says, oh yeah, maybe it's bad, Moshiach. So what we're going to do is to say even stronger, Moshiach. And then people will begin to realize, a lot of people will begin to realize, a lot of people will say to you now that the only way they see that the only possible way is that Moshiach has to come. Therefore, you look in Rashi brings in one shot, Eretz Moria is referring to the Keturas. But the Onkelos says it's referring to the Keturas. Moria from Rosh Moria, one of the main things in the Keturas. The Keturas important says tremendously high madrega. It's a madrega of Mesiras Nefesh. Very, very high thing brought about. That's it, guys. We're holding in the last Hadikot trial, the last Nisoya. So we've got to be very strong. We've got to go through. We're going to know it's only in Nisoya and build Tishum Sovik. Hashem is going to make miracles and He's going to bring all these things. We'll look back and we'll see it was all just a trial. It was all in Nisoya. But the part of the Nisoya is that we're going to be Tmimim. And that's why the Rebbe Rashab called the yeshiva Tomchei Tmimim, because he said there's going to come a time when only that sort of Tmimus went through. Famous sikha what the Rebbe Rashab said. You look it up, the Chayoli Beis David, that's a new acronym for Chabad. Chayoli Beis David. It's a matter of Omen Kein Yehi Rotzein and take it from Yad Mamish. And we should save ourselves from this terrible Yisurim of the last moments of this unbelievable, terrible dollars. And we should see the Har Moria, Eretz HaMoria, Mamish Begoleh. Okay, so listen, I just have a couple of words to say, and that is that Wait until the floor. And that is to say,